Welcome into the Room for Improvement podcast. As always, I am Sebastian Posey. Here with me is Josh Zavadil.
I am here sitting next to him.
Hey, Josh. We have been all week talking about April 27th. We are coming up, when this is released, will be the 3-year anniversary of April 27th. You can find a bunch of the content we've done all week on our website. We have multiple podcasts. We have multiple reports. Josh and I have both written articles you can find on the website. And in one of those articles, I spoke with Drew Bryant. He is a senior at the University of Alabama, a telecommunication and film major. And he is with us today. Drew, say hey.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, guys, for having me.
Thanks for being with us, Drew. You're still, obviously, you're at the University of Alabama. Your first year would have been that year. You were a freshman when all this happened.
Freshman, yeah.
Just kind of talk about what it was like being at the school before April 27th and just how the city was.
Well, I mean, it was completely different. I know my biggest thing that I saw change, I guess, was being on 15th Street. I mean, you had, business after business on 15th Street. And just all that there, and, it's completely different now. And there was trees. I mean, I know we talked the other day how many trees you saw around the city, and you go around now and they're not there. And so that was probably the biggest visual difference. I mean, obviously you got a different sense of, urgency and stuff like that, but I think the biggest change for me, at least, was seeing 15th Street.
Okay, so let's go. Let's dive right into this. Let's go. April 27th. It's the morning of April 27th, Wednesday. What were you doing? What do you remember about that day? Before the big tornado hit, what do you remember about that day?
My morning was actually kind of interesting. I had one class that day, basketball class, and it wasn't until 1 o'clock. So I'm kind of a late sleeper, so I wouldn't get up till 11, 12. But I got phone calls at 8 that morning from my girlfriend at the time, and it woke me up, and she said, "Hey, a tornado has just hit in Guntersville, which is my hometown, and so it's pretty bad, but we're okay. Power's out." She said, "You probably should call your parents, make sure that they're good." So I did that. I called my parents a couple times and got through to them. They said, "We're fine," and everything. And so I went in the living room, turned on the TV, talked to my roommate who was also from Guntersville, told him about it, and ended up going back to bed. My mom said, "Just be careful. We heard that they might be coming through there later," and so I ended up going back to sleep and woke up at about 11:30 probably, and got ready to go to class. And I mean, it's a sunny day outside. I mean, you wouldn't expect anything to happen. It's a nice day, and go to class and end up coming back from basketball at 1:50 and go out and play frisbee with my roommates. I mean, it's a nice day up until I guess about 4 o'clock when everything started happening.
It's interesting you say that it didn't seem like anything was going to happen that day. We spoke earlier in one of our podcasts with Ted McInerney. He's one of our meteorologists, and he talks about how if it is like that in the day, if there's a point where the sun comes out, where it starts warming up, that's actually not a good sign.
Right.
And if you're not really someone who really understands weather, you don't look at it that way.
Right.
You see it as storm was this morning, it's gone, now it's a sunny day, I don't have to worry about it. So I imagine having that, and then all of a sudden, as one of your classmates talked about in the article, you just see the sky turn incredibly dark.
Right.
After it being such a nice day. What were your thoughts when you saw that, when all of a sudden it went from a very sunny, very warm April afternoon to just pitch black?
Well, it was really weird. Like I said, I mean, you kind of talked about the weather aspect of it. It's that calm before the storm. You always hear it, but you don't really know exactly what that means. Well, that day we figured out what that meant because, you talked about it being calm and then all of a sudden turning dark. It was, I said I was out playing frisbee. It kind of started getting a little gray while I was out there, and the wind started blowing and kind of picked up a little too much to play, throw a frisbee in. And so we walked back inside, went up to our dorm, and turned on the weather, and it said that the tornado would be coming through in about 15 to 20 minutes. And we thought, well, okay, maybe we should probably head downstairs. So we headed downstairs, and there was a bunch of people looking out the door, had the door open, looking out the door, and that was when I actually started seeing, how black the sky got because from where we were at, you could actually see this black cloud cutting diagonally across the sky, and so it's this perfectly diagonal line cutting across the entire skyline that you can see, and on one side of the diagonal line, it's a light blue, and then on the other side, it's just that complete darkness, like you said, and so that was just, you knew something big was happening, but obviously we didn't know the magnitude of what was happening.
Okay, and Josh, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I believe it hit about 5:11.
5:13, I think, is the official time.
Okay, so 5:13, that's when this EF5
Four.
or EF4, excuse me, hits the ground and just starts just destroying everything in its path. Where were you in that moment?
I was in the Riverside West dorms, which are right beside Jack Warner Parkway. So probably a mile and a half from 15th Street, where it hit the worst on 15th Street, and then about a mile from where it hit in Alberta.
How were you? Did you feel you were in a safe place? Were you were you watching anything? Were you trying to keep up with everything? How were you handling that storm at that moment?
I wasn't too nervous about it. We had a few tornado warnings that month. It was kind of a weird month because we had, I think, 3 or 4 that month, and so I wasn't too nervous. And we were, I knew that I was in the safest place that I could be. Whether or not it was the safest place, I knew it was as safe as I could get. We'd done everything that we were supposed to do. We'd gone downstairs. We'd gotten the hallways, doors were all closed, and so I felt as safe as I could, I guess. And I really, you talk about not being truly prepared, and I didn't think anything about it. So to answer your question, yeah, I felt as safe as I could be.
All right, so the storm has passed. You talked about a little bit in this article that you did go out that night, correct? Not only did you look out on the 28th, but then you also went out the 27th. Where did you go that night? What did you see?
Well, we everything had happened, and we kind of heard that we had initially heard that DCH had gotten hit really hard, which kept finding out later to not be true, and then we heard that University Mall was demolished, which also wasn't true. But we had heard those two things, and so we went back up to our dorm and stayed there for a few minutes, and then thought, well, let's try to drive over to DCH and University Mall to see if that's the case. And so we got on University, and they had University closed off right before we got to Alberta, and that's when we kind of knew that this might be pretty real. And so we turned around and ended up going back to the dorm and parking, and power was out at the dorm by this point. And so we were like, well, we have really nothing else to do. Do you guys want to just walk to 15th Street, see if we can maybe walk to University Mall? And so we kind of decided on that. We walked across the quad, and we saw a tree split in half on the quad. And that was really the first sign that anything had happened. But at that time, that's still nothing compared to everything that we would see. And so it was kind of omniscient right there, I guess, just to see that, and then what we would see, and then we saw a tree had fallen on a car, and at that time still that's nothing. And then we finally got to 15th Street, and there's a rise between campus and the main part of 15th Street, and we were walking up, and then when we top the rise, you look out, and everything is just, trees are cut in half. It literally looked like a war zone when you top that rise, and you kind of could see everything. You could see, where you couldn't see, from that rise to University Mall before, you could see all the way there. Where you couldn't see DCH before, you could see all the way there, where there's no more trees and everything like that. And so it took your breath away right away. And all of a sudden, your phone's out taking pictures, and it's completely shocking, like I said. And as we walked on, we saw piles of buildings in a pile, and I had always heard people say after a tornado, this building was hit hard. This building is, not there anymore. And when people said that to me before, it meant, oh, well, the building just took some pretty significant damage. But on that day, when someone said, this building's not there anymore, it literally meant this building is not there anymore at all. The foundation is literally all that's left. And so we saw a bunch of that. Saw people, frantic. Some people like us that were just kind of walking in shock. And we got all the way to University Mall and then turned around and came back, and it started raining on the way back. But it was just, like I said, it looked as if a bomb had gone off.
What was the because I remember when I was at Alabama, that period basically around the end of April through May, it was just finals. That's all you were worried about, trying to get done with the semester. What was the rest of, because I can't remember if you guys were just basically done at that point or you actually had to go back. What was the rest of that semester like for you?
We had the option. We got an email the next day, and of course, kind of emails kept coming in about what was going on and power being out, when that was possibly to come back. And they knew it was going to be a little while before power came back on campus. And so they actually canceled classes for the rest of the semester. And they said, we'll email you with further options about what we're going to do. And they emailed us later and said, I think all we had left was like 2 or 3 more classes and then finals, like you said. And they said, all our professors emailed us later and said, if you're fine with your grade that you had at this point, you can keep that grade and that'll be your final grade. And if you're not fine with it, if you want to take the final to try to improve upon your grade, you can come back during the summer or at a later time and take the final. But I was okay with most of mine, so I ended up just taking all the ones I had. But the university encouraged us to get home as soon as we could. And so like the dorms, where I was living in the dorms, they tried to close the dorms as soon as they possibly could. So they were kind of pushing for us to get out as soon as possible.
So okay, you didn't take your finals, so you went home.
Yeah.
Did you stay home all summer? Did you come back?
Well, home for me, it was actually kind of interesting. I thought about them getting us out of the dorm pretty quick. Like I said, the tornado had hit Guntersville pretty hard as well, and they had no power in Guntersville, and I had no power in my dorm. So it was this, where do I go? And could I get to Guntersville even if I wanted to? And so I talked to my parents a lot, and they were like, there's really no way for you to get home. And so it was really interesting. I had to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. I'm without power and without really a place here in Tuscaloosa, and I'm without power and can't get home. So I lucked out. My roommate was from near Birmingham, and his dad's house had actually not been hit and still had power. So we went and stayed there for a couple days, then came back to Tuscaloosa and loaded the cars down, and me and a friend of mine headed back to Guntersville when we could make it through. And then I actually did not come back. I had an internship that summer in Huntsville, and so I didn't get to come back. I think I came maybe once during the summer, but I really wasn't back until August.
So what was it like when you did come back? What was it like when you were officially back in August? Was there kind of a weird feeling around campus to you? What was that feeling like?
It was weird. That's really the best word to describe it. Everybody knew what had happened, and you wanted to talk about it, but at the same time you didn't really want to talk about it. It was kind of something that was just there. And football was getting started, so that was a huge thing. And obviously that was the year we won the national championship, and so that was, you see all these ribbons everywhere, the houndstooth ribbons everywhere. And so like I said, it was something that was there. You just tried to kind of avoid talking about it as much as you possibly could. And 15th Street, as I talked about a lot, was kind of cleaned up, but it was still, nothing was there. Instead of these piles of stuff, it's just nothing now. And Alberta City was still pretty bad. Alberta City really looked like 2 days after the tornado. Alberta City took a while to get truly cleaned up. I mean, there was, nicer piles, I guess, but it was still piles of rubble. And it was weird seeing it. It was completely different, and it was like being in a completely new place, leaving one place and coming back to something completely different.
Did you ever, because I went through Alberta a few times too, that I usually do a cutoff going when I get into Tuscaloosa, and I always cut off through Alberta.
Right.
And you're right, like it took for a long time. It basically looked where all the lights were out for months afterwards. Did it ever get easier seeing all this? Did you ever really get used to it, or is it one of those kind of things where every time you would go past this area that's been completely destroyed, it would kind of remind you of that day and give you kind of that sense of shock again?
It's kind of an in between. I mean, you kind of got. I wouldn't say you got numb to it, because I don't think really that's something you can get numb to, but it did get a little easier. It did kind of become a normal thing to see it when you drove through Alberta, and you were like, oh well, it's still there. And same thing with 15th Street. Until they started building back, it was just, oh well, it's still there. So I wouldn't say that it ever became something I was truly used to, but at the same time, it wouldn't ever put me back in that moment. It wouldn't ever make me think just this is awful, and then it was just something that was there.
What was it like the first time you got a warning for another potential severe weather threat from the university? How did you feel the next time you got that?
It was scary, for sure. I know a lot of people immediately went back to that day. I was I wouldn't say unafraid, because I knew, obviously it did put me back in that mindset, but at the same time I knew how rare April 27th was. And so I wasn't, I guess, as worried as some people, but at the same time you still get that sense of, could it happen again? And when you look out and you see the sky start to turn that dark gray color, you're like, this is where I was at. That's what I was looking at, that type of thing. And so it does give you the uneasy stomach a little bit.
You talked about earlier in the week when you and I spoke for this article that you can read on CBS42.com, that it took about a year, you say, before you really started seeing new buildings go up. Just how was that rebuild process of starting to see the city kind of try to get back?
It's really interesting. It's long, but at the same time, everything's newer. So I guess a lot of buildings, the silver lining, if there is one, is that a lot of these buildings in Tuscaloosa did kind of need this renovation. Obviously, you don't want to see it happen that way, but a lot of these buildings are, a newer looking building. So we have a newer looking city, especially on 15th Street, where that rebuilding process is the strongest right now. It looks just new because everything is new, and it's still weird because everything's different. There's a lot more apartment complexes coming in where there were businesses at. I forgot the actual name of the strip mall that was on McFarland, but there's the lofts at City Centers there now, and it's this huge array of apartments where there was just a Chuck E. Cheese before, and so.
Are you talking about where the Hobby Lobby
Yeah,
and the Big Lots
that
and all
one,
that stuff was?
That one, yeah. There's this giant apartment complex there now, whereas before it was just this kind of old business. Mm-hmm. Same thing with the new Krispy Kreme and the new Full Moon. Those were just older buildings before, and now they're this new restaurant.
One of the reasons that we kind of really wanted to interview students and why I reached out to you guys in your class to sit down and talk with you guys is you represent a very interesting group, with the exception of grad students and people that are taking like the 5-6 year plans. You're really going to be the last group that was there that saw Tuscaloosa before the storm.
Right.
And was there after it to see the rebuild process. Just how does that feel knowing like your class is kind of like, I don't want to call you the tornado class, but like that kind of gives you guys a distinction of being there the entire time, from the beginning of the storm to now, to where they've really started rebuilding the city. How is that feel? Kind of a weird, is that a weird feeling to know that that's your class, that you are part of that, that it was something that's going to be remembered for the city of Tuscaloosa forever? Is it just something that, have you ever thought of it that way?
I have. I guess I really thought about it probably maybe last year around this time. I was like, well, we're gonna be that last true 4-year class, and it was weird, but like you said, it gives us this distinction, and it's special in a way, but at the same time, it's one of those things where you don't want to be special for that, but it's crazy because it gives. This is something I'm gonna tell my grandkids about, and so like. It will be somewhat neat, I guess, to say to kids and grandkids when they start hearing about what happened that day. I'm gonna be like, well, yeah, that was my freshman year there, and I think that's the biggest sense about it is this, that I'll be able to say that was my freshman year there. I saw that. That I was the last, true class to see that. And that's really, it's weird, but at the same time, it's somewhat interesting.
Walking around campus now, do you like the trees are all like we were talking about earlier? There is a slight vibe to it. Is there anything even around campus now that it's 3 years later that just out of nowhere you're walking to say like an English class and nothing's on your mind, and all of a sudden you see this and it kind of takes you back to that day? Is there anything around campus like that?
I wouldn't say there's anything really. Well, mainly when I go back to my dorm, or when I go back to the dorm I was in. That's on the other side of campus, so I don't venture down there very often. So when I do go down there and I do see that dorm, see Riverside West, and look up at it, that's what causes me to think about it the most, is because that's where I was at, and that was really the last time I was there. I haven't been in Riverside West since the 3 days after the tornado, and so I guess that would be the only thing that really causes me to think about it and get feels about it, is seeing Riverside West and knowing that that's where I was when everything went down.
Would you have ever been able to say live in that dorm again?
Probably, but it'd be kind of hard. I think I could do it, but it would be one of those things where I would have to get used to it before I could just, be okay there.
Is April 27th something you and your friends kind of ever just talk about? Do you just don't really want to think about it? Is it before I like tracked you guys down to do anything for this, was this something that you would ever speak about with each other?
It's one of those things, as I said before, right after, it was one of those things where you didn't really want to talk about it. You knew it was there and you didn't really want to talk about it. And I think that's kind of become the case more and more, because there's less reasons to talk about it. I mean, so you don't like revisiting it when you don't have to. So I guess that's kind of become the sense on campus and with my friends as well, is that, hey, we just don't really talk about it unless there's a reason to, or unless we have to. We're not just going to bring it up out of nowhere. We're not just going to say, hey, do you remember April 27th? And, if someone asks, what's my story, obviously I'll, gladly tell them. But you don't really just talk about it and bring it up randomly in a group.
What's your take on how the city handled it? Like, did Mayor Walt Maddox, who I think everyone now knows who he was, I don't know if anyone really knew unless you interviewed him or just kind of ran into him before. Like, did you know who Walt Maddox was before that day?
Not really.
What's your take on how he handled it and how the city really handled the disaster zone after the storm?
I think Mayor Maddox handled it very well. I think it was he handled it as well as any city possibly could, in my opinion. Obviously that's not an easy thing to deal with. I mean, but I was really impressed with, how he was about it. And I think everybody in Tuscaloosa kind of feels that way as well. And obviously, certain parts of the city was a little slower to come back. Alberta City, I know, was the slowest part, but at the same time, when you take into account exactly what happened and the fact that Alberta's infrastructure was damaged almost as much as everything you see on top, you got to kind of realize, well, it's understandable. And so, some people might think, well, it's a little slow comeback, but at the same time, I think it was handled as best as it possibly could have been for what it was.
One of the people that you were with when I interviewed you guys for this article, Hannah Mills, talked about something she saw after the storm was this greater sense of community. Do you agree with that?
100%. I mean, you saw these ribbons, the Houndstooth ribbons, everywhere. The Alabama fans, love their football, and they're crazy about it. But it all of a sudden became more of this family atmosphere of coming together for relief. And this is what we want to win for that now. And you saw you heard so many stories of people that help people the day of and the day after the tornado, and you always hear that after disasters happen, but they seem to just keep coming in and keep coming in, and still to this day you'll hear the occasional story and you'll think, well, maybe I haven't heard that before. And we bonded together. Actually, I have a shirt that says "Together we stand strong," and it was just this incredible sense of neighbors helping neighbors, and we are together. We all went through this together, whether or not we lost everything or not. We're still in this together, and so I think that's the biggest thing that I saw coming out of it.
We are almost out of time. Drew, I really appreciate you doing this for us. If somebody wanted to find you on any of these social media platforms, how would they do that?
Drew Bryant on Facebook, and at Drew Bryant on Twitter, Instagram, and Vine. I was pretty lucky to grab that name pretty quick. So
Seriously.
At Drew Bryant on pretty much all across the social media board.
Great. Appreciate it, Drew. Thank you for stopping in and doing this. And like I said, this is going to be up on April 27th. So if you're listening to this on the day of, check out CBS42.com. We've got plenty of more content from other podcasts with some of our meteorologists, with some other students, as well as Josh has written a good piece on his take on it. He does something every year where with him being actually down there during the storm, he always kind of likes to reflect 1 year later. He has that on our website. I have something with Drew on our website as well. So you can find all that on CBS42.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.